Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of the SCHIFF Show. I'm Brian Schiff. I'm thrilled that you're here to join us tonight to help make aviation safer. We got a great program tonight. We're going to talk about some fun things and hopefully learn a lot in the process as well. My background, I've been an airline pilot for 36 years and been flight instructing for like 40-something years, Gold Seal flight instructor. I've got just broke 21,000 hours. And been enjoying it. I kind of consider the airline job my side job, and this general aviation stuff my primary job. So, anyway, I'm here I love teaching. I love to have fun teaching and do it in a way that's enjoyable for everybody. I hope you walk away from something tonight that benefits you as well. We couldn't do this if it wasn't for Avemco. I truly appreciate their sponsorship of this program. Their generosity is making this possible. But not only that, I got to tell you a story. Back when I was learning to fly in the family Citabria, I had it a little bit too close to the hangar door one time when I went inside to push it open. Lo and behold, the hangar door met the Citabria rudder, and the two did not get along very well. The hangar door won, but with the safety net of Avemco there to save the day, they made everything better again, and it was not nearly as painful as it could have been. Without insurance, you're just really asking for it, and you just never know when things like that are going to happen. So I highly recommend you have the insurance. I recommend Avemco. I've been using them since I was 14, so about 5 years now. No, a lot more than that. Also, if you do, mention that you watch the SCHIFF Show, and you'll get a discount. Also, tonight is eligible for Wings credit, and you'll automatically receive that. Actually, after you take the test, we're going to talk about that in a second. Once you take the test that's on the resources page, you will receive Wings credit. Also in the resources is the book that has the Wings user guide. So if the Wings program confuses you, it's pretty good. Just go to that Wings. It's like the manual, the owner's manual for Wings program. So just click on the course resources and you'll see an article that I posted that was published by and originally written by my father, Brian Schiff, on precautionary landings. It kind of has something to do with tonight. It's an excellent piece that NAFI published. But you get the NAFI magazine for free. We're just going to give you the whole magazine, and the article is on page 19 of that magazine. Also, you can click a link to subscribe to the SCHIFF Show email. That way you'll keep up to date on topics, the podcasts, archives, and any updates that we have. So feel free to check out the course resources in there as well. And when it's time for the Wings credit, you'll click on the Wings credit, take the test, you'll get your Wings credit. So again, every episode, we're going to have these 5 segments, approximately 10 minutes each. Sometimes one might be longer than the other. Typically, we'll start with an accident review, and then we'll kind of study procedures, training, and things that we can do to try to prevent that kind of accident. But tonight, the accident review will be placed by my emergency. What could have been an accident actually wasn't, but for the way it was handled by the crew, maybe a little bit of luck and divine intervention, I don't know, but could have been an accident. Thankfully wasn't, but it was a very harrowing emergency. So we'll take a look at that and discuss what you can do to handle emergency yourself when it comes up, how you can be prepared for it. So that's what we're going to look at is my emergency, and then we'll talk about handling emergencies. So what is an emergency? It's a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. So if you have something that is serious, unexpected, could be dangerous, or whatever requires immediate action, you have an emergency. Many people in the seminars I give, I'll ask, hey, who's declared an emergency? And unfortunately, not very many have. And I say unfortunately because then I'll follow up with the question, how many have had a situation where they should have declared an emergency but didn't? And then I get a lot of hands raised. And then I ask, what is the main reason you didn't declare an emergency? Well, I was worried about the paperwork. I was worried about getting in trouble. And I really want to encourage you to get a mindset away from that. Your mindset should be, I'm happy to write a report, which you probably will not have to do. I'm happy, and you're probably not going to get in trouble either. You just need to do what you need to do to stay alive. Bottom line is, at that point, when something goes awry, it's time to do something, anything that is in your best interest. How many accidents have we had to date in 2025? We have a lot of internet entertainers who are professing to teach, and they're saying that it's getting safer, and they're just looking at the fatal accidents. I'm not going to throw any statistics at you, but what I will do is show you a few of the accidents that we've had year to date. These are just ones that I know about. There probably are many more. So are we getting safer? I don't know. And it really doesn't matter to me whether we're getting safer or not. But way too many accidents are happening. And in the news lately, we've seen a lot. Obviously, when one happens, the media seems to want to grab onto more. And yes, these are not repeating. These are still more accidents. This is just since January 1 of this year, these accidents that you're seeing here. And there'll be a quiz. You'll have to list these later. So I don't know, again, how many there have been. I don't know. All I know is there's too many. It happens too often. And because of that, you need to be careful. You need to be ready for it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. One of the things that happens is a perfectly good, they're still going. These are just this year. So once again, these are happening every about half a second. They're popping up there. I think that's it. In any event, suffice it to say, we've had a lot of accidents. One is too many. So the most important thing to do if you have something go wrong in the airplane is keep calm. Try to control your emotions, act calmly, kind of think about it. We teach at the airline, how many sip of coffee problem is this? Well, I got a light come on, my generator failed. I could do that. Nothing's going to go wrong, not going to crash, but you're going to calm down, take a few deep breaths, kind of like I need to do right now, and and just evaluate what you've got going on. If the airplane is still flying, keep flying it. By all means, just keep following through with that. If you have a door pop open, for example, keep calm. It's going to get loud. It's going to be noisy. You might lose 1 or 2 knots of airspeed, a little bit of performance, not enough to even worry about. We just see too many accidents. And there was another one recently where a door pops open and an airplane crashes. One should not lead to the other. What leads to the crash is the pilot's poor response. One thing you're going to know is that when you have your aviation career, you're going to have one flight that will define you. And you never know which flight is going to define you and what everybody's going to measure you by. Certainly this captain on this flight is known for that one flight and the way he handled it. So let's move on. The first section tonight, we'll talk about my emergency. So let's get on to it. This was a Smoke in the Cockpit event. I was departing St. Louis for Portland in an MD-80, and it was a night flight. I don't know if you've seen the trailer that we put out, the video that we put out, but I'm going to go ahead and show that rather than tell the whole story right here, because I think they did a pretty good job producing it. And this was made by Vision Safe, a company I've gotten 100% behind, and they're not paying me to do this. I've had 3 smoke emergencies. I love the product that they're putting out because this is going to make operations safer. Some airlines already have this product, and I'm pretty sure that they all will have it pretty soon. It's so simple that it's something you could do in GA airplanes as well. They published this video, and they interviewed me and had me tell my story. So that's the meaning behind this video. I'm going to go ahead and play it.
Souls on board is 177, 177 souls on board.
I had a flight where we had smoke in the cockpit shortly after takeoff, and this was a fall evening. It was after dark. We're taking off out of St. Louis for Portland. Everything was routine, a very nice, quiet flight, climbing out of about 25,000 feet. And all of a sudden I could smell something a little bit funny, unusual. And just then the cabin attendant started calling me, the ding, 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 and it was a special kind of call that let me know that something's wrong. This is not a normal call. By the time I picked up the interphone to answer the flight attendant, I could see the smoke just billowing into the flight deck. We train for that. We train for fighting that. We train for going through the aircraft systems. What we don't train for, and something that surprised me during this event, one was how thick the smoke was. The smoke billowing in was so thick, so strong, like, holy cow, if I reach forward, I'm looking, and I still can't see them. I had to lean so far forward that I was pushing on the control wheel, and when I did that, it tripped the autopilot off, which right at that point was a crutch, because I can't see my flight instruments. I don't know which way is up if I can't see my instruments. Now, I'm fortunate I had thousands of hours in this airplane, and I was an instructor in this airplane, that I can find switches by feel, which I did, and I got the autopilot back on. But if I could not have got that autopilot on at that time, I can't even imagine how it would have been to try to fly the airplane without instruments. You cannot fly an airplane by the seat of your pants. So seeing your instruments is life and death. Without it, you cannot rely on the human feel, can't tell which way's up. I did a lot of that by feel, and there was a checklist there. My co-pilot said, I can't read it, can't see it. Today I got to try the EVAS simulator. As soon as the smoke started coming in, it brought back the memory. I thought, wow, this is amazing. I was truly impressed. Now I've got control of the airplane. I can see everything. I can see my charts. I can see plates. I can reach and see the flight controls and out the window. That's a lifeline. That's a lifeline. Being able to have your pilot see the instruments and see out the window is life and death.
We got to declare an emergency. We have smoke in the cockpit. 177 souls on board. We have smoke in the cabin, smoke in the cockpit. We need to get the people off. We'd like to declare an emergency at this time. As far as I can tell, we have smoke and fumes in the cockpit.
The emergency is an Airbus 321. Smoke in the cockpit. 185 souls on board.
So I think that's among the worst things that can happen in an airplane is an in-cabin or cockpit fire, including smoke. But if it happens, you want to be ready for it. So once again, thank you again to Vision Safe for producing that, for the product that they're putting out, for helping to, again, make aviation safer. Like I said in that video, seeing your instruments is life and death. And just to reiterate, we were climbing out, discussing what we're going to eat on our crew meals, what the weather's like, what we're going to do on the layover in Portland. And all of a sudden the call bells started coming, the emergency call. But before it even finished, smoke was billowing into the cockpit. And before I could even figure out what was going on, I could not see my flight instruments. I leaned forward. I tripped off the autopilot. Then that caused a little bit of panic. This was a scary scenario. Now, the airplane was in trim and climbing just fine. I probably had a lot of time to just leave it alone and try and figure it out and deal with it before anything really bad happened. But as it was, like I said, I had a lot of experience on aircraft that made up for a lot of the shortcomings of not having the autopilot or being able to see. I was able to find the switch, and I did re-engage the autopilot. I remember distinctly there was a reading light over my head that illuminates the map, like a map light. And it was on bright because I was looking at my charts. Yeah, we had paper charts then. They weren't self-illuminated by an iPad, so to speak. But I remember that light making a spear in the fog in front of me. And I just could not see my flight instruments, but had to have a lot of faith that the autopilot was doing what it was supposed to do, let alone reading the checklist. Now, I told my first officer, we got to get our oxygen mask, our smoke goggles on. We got to get on the interphone. I know I've got a lot of passengers panicking in the back. This is something that they don't train us for. We don't know what's happening in the back when we're flying a simulator, and they can't really train you for that. And it was very tough because I did hear the flight attendants calling. I heard people yelling, we got to do something, and blah, blah, blah. Drop the oxygen masks. And just so you know, if you're a passenger who is, and special thanks to my friend who mentioned to me that I should discuss what nervous passengers should do in such a situation, have faith that the procedure is going to get you through, and there really haven't been any horrible crash. Well, there have been, but have faith in your flight crew. We're trained to handle this, and we did handle it. We got it on the ground just fine. It's a very scary moment, but we can't drop the oxygen masks because it mixes ambient air full of smoke with the oxygen that you're breathing, and it mixes those two together at a ratio appropriate for your altitude. So that wasn't an option, and people were yelling and wanting me to drop the oxygen mask. I could actually hear that through the cockpit door. Also, do you want to introduce oxygen into an environment where you might have a fire? So that's another scary thing that you want to be careful about. I've had 3 smoke events. On a second one, I had a flight attendant tell me that not only did we have smoke and fumes and eyes were burning and throats were very caustic smell and odor. But she said when she took her feet off and walked on the floor, which is one of their procedures, that the floor was very hot and mushy over the aft cargo compartment. So I just assumed I had a cargo fire. My prime directive was to get that airplane on the ground and safely, while I had my first officer read the checklist. So I said, you run the checklist. I'm going to fly the airplane to the airport. Whoever finishes first, great, but there was a wall between us. So you might as well have considered me a single pilot. One of the smoke events, we were deviating in between embedded thunderstorms. The smoke smelled electrical. Well, what do you do with an electrical fire? You immediately turn off all your electricity, which was going to remove my radar at a time when I needed it the most. So I remember telling my first officer, hold on, don't do that step yet. I took a look at the radar. I, in my head, envisioned, okay, I got to go straight ahead for about a minute, 45 degrees left until we break out. And I just had that in my head. Okay, now shut it off. And that's basically dead reckoning from the radar information that I had just looked at. And we did break out of the clouds. And again, we landed and evacuated on the runway in that situation. And nobody got hurt, thankfully. Maybe some throats and eyes burned. But I am going to move on to some of the procedures that we've got in general aviation and otherwise that we can use to handle emergencies. How should we be handling them? So the procedures that we talk about are in the SCHIFF show. We were talking about AIMS and FAR and publications and basically procedures and things that are given to us that are in publication and writing. The training, we'll talk about some techniques. So the first thing is, if you were to look in the manual, for example, here's the manual of the Cessna 172, our model. There's a very important statement in there that probably people don't read. And I would really encourage you to pick up your manuals and read section 3, read the emergency section, read the paragraphs that lead up to it. In this case, it says emergencies caused by airplane or engine malfunctions are extremely rare if proper pre-flight inspections and maintenance are practiced. That is hugely important. And we're going to talk a little bit about some maintenance suggestions and some pre-flight things that we can look at later I conversed with my good friend Jeff Simon about that. And we're going to have some advice for you there. But in the event, an airplane that's well-maintained should not break. If it's pre-flighted well, it should not break. En route weather, pre-flighting, and checking all that ahead of time. That's how first thing is you want to avoid the accident. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But note that it says that in the aircraft manual. So again, we're looking at the Skyhawk manual, section 3. And if we were to look at the emergency I had, the electrical fire in flight, how do you know if it's an electrical fire or if it's a burning oil fire? That became an issue at the airlines, and they started giving us some guidance on what these things smell like. If you've ever used a cordless drill, if you don't know what electrical fire smells like, use a cordless drill, operate it, and then smell the vents on the back. You'll smell electrical burning odor. That's normal with electric drills and other appliances like that. But if you do that, that'll kind of give you a clue as to what that smells like. Burning oil is usually a white smoke. In general aviation aircraft, you don't have that unless you have some kind of air conditioning system coming through the engine or whatever. But depending on your aircraft system, know what kind of smoke is possible and what does it smell like. But in this case, the electrical fire in flight for Cessna, the first step is master switch off. Obviously, kill all the electrical. Vents, cabin, air, heat closed. Why are we doing that? Obviously, we don't want to feed the fire by blowing on it, right? How do you get a fire to grow? You fan it. Fire extinguisher activate if available. That's, you got to be careful with that because that stuff's not good for you, but neither is a fire. So you're taking the lesser of two evils. So the way you'd want to read this checklist to yourself as a single pilot, or even if you're having someone read it to you as in a 2-pilot operation, it's condition, response, response. So it's more like condition, response, do, response. So it would sound like this. Electrical fire in flight. Always read the title first because you might have the wrong one. Reading the title will help you. Master switch off. You do it. Then you say off. Vents, cabin air, heat closed. You close them and then you say closed. Fire extinguisher activate. You do it and you say activate. Now you might notice that those first 3 steps are bold and then the rest of them are not bold. Why is that? Well, interestingly enough, if you read the section there, it tells you that the procedures are bold-faced. They are immediate action items and should be committed to memory. This is your aircraft manual telling you to memorize certain steps. And I'm telling you that you should also memorize certain steps because you may not have time to get the book out and read it before something really bad happens. But look through your emergency procedures. I would recommend that every time you go flying, read one emergency procedure. I have all my students do that. There aren't as many as you think. And if you're familiar with them, you'll know that they're there. You'll know what's not there. But more importantly, you get these memory items down so that you can save your life, then get the book out. So just bear that in mind. So moving on down this checklist, if the fire has been extinguished and electrical power is necessary, blah, blah, blah. So this isn't a conditional statement. It says if. When you see a statement that says if, then you may or may not continue with that part of the checklist. So you basically, how we do it at the airline is we read the conditional statement. We read from if to the comma or the next punctuation. And if it doesn't apply, we say that does not apply. And we move on to the next part that doesn't have a conditional statement. So in this case, if the fire has been extinguished and, well, if the fire is still burning, that part does not apply. If it's still burning, we're just going to get to the nearest possible place we can land and get on the ground. So if it does apply, then of course you'll do those steps. Now, a cabin fire, a little bit different. Again, master switch off, Vensky. The first three memory items are the same, so that's good. But you'll notice at the end it says land as soon as possible to inspect for damage. So it says as soon as possible. Well, you'll notice that sometimes the checklist will say land as soon as possible, and sometimes it'll say land at the nearest suitable airport. Well, what's the difference there? There's a big difference. Nearest suitable airport might be one that has emergency services, might have maintenance available, fuel services, transportation services basically. Land as soon as possible means to save your life, get this thing on the nearest piece of pavement. We'll worry about that stuff later. So just be aware that the two different ways of wording in your checklist like that. As far as declaring an emergency, like I said earlier, a lot of people don't. Pilots are very hesitant to declare an emergency. The AIM even says that. But there's nothing in the AIM that actually says declare an emergency. And it's interesting because I did some studying on this in the AIM and I couldn't find anything. The only time those three words appear together is where it says pilots are reluctant to declare an emergency. It does have some different language that we should use. In practical, I'm going to tell you, if you say emergency, everybody's going to know what you mean. It's a little bit vague and ambiguous in the AIM if you read it and take it literally. So just be aware of that. But we've got an emergency frequency of 121.5. We've got the squawk code of 7700. And if there's anything goes wrong, just totally out of the ordinary, and you need some help from ATC, just say, I'm declaring an emergency and I've got to, do some stuff here. I need some help. The regulations we all know what 91.3 gives the pilot the responsibility and authority. But basically, let's look at it a little closer. So the pilot in command of an aircraft is directly responsible. It doesn't say solely like it used to say, because there may be some other people responsible depending on the operation. But the final authority as to the operation of that aircraft, the final authority of operating that aircraft does not include air traffic control. They are below the pilot in this case. Pilot in command is the final authority for the way that aircraft is being operated. So it also says in an in-flight emergency requiring immediate action, the PIC can deviate from any regulation in this section they need to. So the rule book goes out the door at this point. You need to do what's important for you to do for survival. It doesn't matter if you bust airspace or airspeed rules or anything else like that. Don't worry about the rules so much. They can actually get you in trouble trying to follow the rules and not fly the airplane and handle the emergency. Lastly, if you do declare an emergency and you deviate from a rule of this section, if you are requested to write a report, then you're to write a report only if requested, and do that as soon as possible. Don't worry about having to justify what you did. If it was in the interest of safety, nobody's going to argue with that. You should be pleased enough to be alive to write the report. So that said, I've declared many emergencies and never had. In fact, I declare an emergency before every takeoff. I'm kidding. That's not true. But I've declared many emergencies. I've never had to write a report other than the required, like for the company, if I declare an emergency at the airline. What's worse, writing a report or serious injury or death? So ask yourself that. As far as that declaring the emergency also, one thing that it says in the AIM is that an emergency can be one of two things. There's a distress emergency or an urgency emergency. So it's emergency can be either distress or urgent. What's the difference? Well, urgency, if we look in the pilot controller glossary, is a condition of being concerned about safety and requiring timely but not immediate assistance. A potential distress situation could develop if you don't do the right thing. And I had my wife gave me a great analogy. She said, so urgency means go to urgent care. Distress means you're going to go to the ER. And I thought that was a great analogy. So I'll take that one. Distress is a condition of being threatened by serious and or imminent danger and requiring immediate assistance. That sounds like a real bona fide emergency. Mayday is the word in the AIM given to pilots and it's internationally recognized as a distress signal. When repeated 3 times, it means you're in imminent and grave danger. And really what it means here practically for us is if you're on a radio and there's a lot of chatter and you need everybody to be quiet so you can talk, that's what you say. And those words, if you hear them, should make you be quiet as well. Allow the pilot who says those words to talk. If it's a urgent situation, it's pan twice, and you say pan 3 times. So it would be pan. Now, it sounds funny. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that on the radio here in the United States. I don't think I've ever said it. I've had several emergencies. It kind of feels funny saying it, but everybody knows and is trained to what those words mean. So be aware of that as you're experiencing your emergency. Distress, that kind of emergency will get you priority over all communications. The controller tools, they have a toolbox they can open to help you with a lot of things. They have emergency maps they can pull up only if you're in distress. There are a lot of things that they can do to help you. Expect to be asked your fuel on board, and that's in minutes, how many minutes you have. So maybe be thinking about that before the emergency, because while you're declaring an emergency, fighting something, talking to air traffic control, how many fuel in minutes do I have? Oh gosh, 4 hours, 4 times 6, 60. You don't want to have to do that. So maybe kind of give that some thought beforehand. They always want to know how many souls on board. It's a little bit morbid, but in the search and rescue, that's important. Urgency has priority over everything but distress, aircraft in distress, and you will get a lot of help from ATC as well. There was, if I go back here, actually, I want to talk about the Piper Arrow over Delaware that crashed several years ago. Over the top of Delaware Airport, after making several go-arounds, missed approaches in the clouds, running perilously low on fuel, he sees Dover, Delaware Air Force Base, and says, "Hey, I see a runway below me. Can I land there?" And the controller says, "Not unless it's an emergency." So he continues, but he's on empty. He waited until the engine flamed out, and then he said, "Mayday, mayday, mayday, I'm declaring an emergency. My engine failed." No, the time to declare that emergency is as soon as you are worried about something. He should have declared that emergency, landed right there and then while he had his engine running. It turns out he turned around and crashed about a mile shy of that airport, killed himself. So it's interesting also in the AIM, it says that pilots don't hesitate to declare an emergency. Like I just said, when something's dire, the engine just quit, I got a fire or whatever. But when they have something kind of urgent, they are very reluctant to report an urgency condition. Don't be. If you have something out of the ordinary, it could develop into something much worse. Why wait for that to happen? Fess up. Admit to ATC, tell them, "Hey, I've got an urgent situation, declare an emergency and deal with it and get on the ground and just end it as soon as you can." The earlier you make corrections, the smaller that correction will have to be. The later you wait, the worse it could be. So there are plenty of accidents out there we could talk about where pilots continued on when they shouldn't have. Regarding filing flight plans, if you do have to land, time works against people who experience a distress, but not on a VFR flight plan. So many pilots I know, it's just they're too good to file VFR flight plans. It could be 36 hours might pass before anybody's looking at you, because it might be that long before anybody initiates an alert of any kind, before they know you're missing. When people ask me or students ask me, hey, should I file a VFR flight plan? I always say yes. Well, actually, only if you want someone looking for you in the event you make an off-airport landing. If you don't want anybody looking for you, don't file a flight plan. Again, the AIM also goes on and talks about the pilot in command's authority, but I found it interesting that there's a small note in there that in the event of pilot incapacitation, the Autoland system that conducts an emergency descent may assume operation of the aircraft, and that system may deviate from the rules. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If the emergency authority is used to deviate from the revisions from the rules, again, the AIM is saying the same thing. It's reiterating the FAR that you must notify ATC as soon as you have to break a rule. Talk about it. Fess up. Keeping these things secret are only going to hurt you. Unless a deviation is necessary, pilots of IFR flights experiencing two-way radio communications have the procedures that they're supposed to stick to. The requirements in there, the not loss of comm requirements, are a little bit antiquated. And I've had controllers tell me that, gosh, we really don't want you doing that. If you stop and hold out there at the initial approach fix, you're going to cause more problems than you had before if you just go and land. So it makes sense. Use common sense. You have an emergency. Are you going to hold or maybe get it on the ground? Use your judgment, but remember that you don't have to follow all the rules when you have an emergency. Always keep track of whether or not you're in radar contact as well. Because if you're in radar contact and they're watching you, you're in radar contact, it gives you a little bit more freedom. They can see what you're doing. And again, if you have the electricity to squawk 7600, then of course they'll know you can't communicate, but they're going to watch you. So you do what makes sense on top of being able to do the written test question answers or answer in an oral what you're going to do if you lose communications. Anytime you're apprehensive for your safety, request assistance immediately. That is one thing that is in the AIM. It says request assistance immediately. Delay has caused many accidents and caused lives, and I think that's very important advice. The AIM also says, and this is just a little bit more information because we're talking about the procedure aspect of this, that when you're talking about the fire station at the airport, the fire control equipment, the fire department, they are called the ARF, Air Rescue Firefighting, whatever, are called command. So whatever airport you're at, followed by the word command, that's their call sign. So like this says, if you're at LAX, you want to talk to the fire engine, it's LAX command, this is Cessna, blah, blah, blah. That's their call sign. So just be aware of that. You can also ask for a discrete frequency. That might keep you off of liveatc.net and VAS Aviation's collection of all the snafus that happen on ATC. Also know that I saw an emergency the other day. It was actually a smoke in the cabin of a Piper Archer. It landed immediately, and the firefighter was doing that, and so the guy taxis forward. No, that's not a taxi command. That's a recommend evacuation. They see something that warrants you getting out of the airplane. If they say stop, that means, hey, stop the evacuation. If you're in an aircraft with a lot of people, that could be important. It doesn't mean stop the aircraft. It means stop the evacuation. And of course, just like in baseball, this means safe. Everything is okay right now, that when they see there's no fire, there's no threat, they give you that symbol, hand signal. That means everything's okay. The emergency is contained. The AIM also recommends that while you're in flight, monitor 121.5. I highly recommend that. The airlines all do it. So I'm hearing all of the meowing that's happening on the frequency. I highly discourage you from doing that. I wish those who are meowing would stop. There might be a time when someone really needs to talk on that frequency. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, read up on it. In-flight monitoring and reporting. If you have a long flight plan, make a report somewhere so that means, hey, I've made it to this point. If I don't show up at my destination, that tells search and rescue they don't have to look for you up to that point. You'd be beyond that point. An Air Force review of, I'm going to let this speak for itself. I'm running behind because I got way too much material, so I'm going to skip over that. But to receive the protection of search and rescue, file a flight plan. I'm going to highly encourage you. It's free. You've already paid for it with your taxes. The services are there. It's not that difficult. It's easier now than it ever was because you can do it on your phone and on your app. Your ELT, it should be tested and in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. A lot of things should be done by the manufacturer. There are analog ones that transmit on 121.5 and 243 megahertz, and then there's the digital ones that go to satellite now in the 406 megahertz range as well. ELT should only be tested during the first 5 minutes after every hour. So every time I hear an ELT when I'm flying across the country, I look at my watch, and if it's within, if you have an emergency within those first 5 minutes after the hour, that could be a bummer because everybody might think you're testing your ELT, but that's what it is. All right, so let's move on to training. What do we train? So this is more technique type stuff that is good to teach pilots, and I teach, what I've heard other pilots and instructors teach. First of all, do your best to prevent a problem. That's the best way to handle it. And it said right there in the Cessna preamble to the emergency chapter that you pre-flight to prevent the accident. Proper pre-flight planning prevents poor performance. That's one we've heard. It's an old one. And I agree with it. Some of the prevention measures that you can take, well, you've heard me say it, and I get it into almost every one of my presentations, is 2 speeds, right? You've got 2 speeds you can choose to operate at, slow and screw up. And pilots in a hurry, rushing to do something, typically are the ones who are getting in accidents. It's a very big common denominator of accidents is pilot was rushing to comply or in a hurry or did something knee-jerk. The other one I say is stay in the envelope. You know your limitations of the aircraft, the regulations, the aim, your personal limitations. Stay inside that. When you go outside that, that's when bad things happen. And also use your checklists. They help. They're there for a reason, and they serve as a barrier for the threats, the failures, the errors. Something that might happen will be caught if you read the checklist. I missed something the other day, and the checklist caught it, so that was great. So prevention is a very important part of that. And again, I was talking to my good friend Jeff Simon, and we had our Cockpit to Cal podcast webinar 2 nights ago, and we were talking about this stuff. And one of the things was very interesting, but we got to talking about it even more afterwards. And I said, Jeff, what else can people do to prevent the problems that are happening in flight? And a big thing is your battery, your aircraft battery. It should be checked annually, and it's required by the manufacturer. I think Part 91, you don't have to do it, but check your battery capacity. You should do a battery capacity check every year. Your battery might be good enough to start the engine, but not good enough to get you out of the clouds or to another airport or last the full time that you think it's going to last while you deviate to an alternate airport. Don't rationalize your malfunctions. This is something else that I thought was great. He said, pilots love to rationalize malfunction. You might have an intermittent problem, and that leads to a creeping normalcy. Well, it's always doing that. It always runs rough right after I start it. And that's what I'm mentioning with the morning sickness. And he and I spoke about that the other night, that my last engine problem I had in a 172 was preceded by a rough start, a rough engine right after engine start, and then kind of came up and got better. It's a sticking valve, and I lost that valve. If you want more detail on that, go back and watch the recording of our Cockpit to Cal. Also, underinflated tires can do a lot of damage. And I had a tire come off. It was my tailwheel tire. I have added checking the tire pressure to every pre-flight. Very important, and don't skimp on that. Don't rationalize when things go wrong. If something else happens, that people are not doing inspections when they should, like if you have a prop strike the tow bar, anytime you have a sudden stop, you could hurt your crankshaft. It could cause an in-flight engine failure. If you bump into something in the hangar, if you experience extreme turbulence, or if you have a flap over speed, you flew too fast with the flaps down, anything like that, those are required inspections and write-ups at the airline. Well, they should be for general aviation as well. One good thing, interesting for an example too, that he mentioned, like the Continental IO 360, 520, 550, they have geared alternators. And he says, ask, when was your alternator coupling last checked? Well, that coupling is like a clutch. It's a weird design. It's attached directly to the engine by a gear. And so if there's a problem with your alternator, guess what? That's going to it's going to turn into a problem with your airplane. Lastly, remember, and this was great advice that he said to me, airplanes don't heal themselves. Compromises you make on the ground sets you up for failure in the air. And what is the most dangerous flight? He quizzed me. And I said, I don't know. It's probably my first flight after a week off. He said, nope, the first one after an annual inspection. I bet most of you answered that already and got that right. So right after the aircraft is inspected, gets an annual inspection, gets torn apart, put back together after any maintenance. Boy, pre-flight the heck out of that airplane. Your prime directive in handling an emergency, fly the airplane, right? Obvious. Step 2, actively monitor your situation. Don't pick up the newspaper while the autopilot's flying the airplane and cruise and ignore what's happening around you. You should be regularly checking your engine health, regularly checking a lot of things, adding to your scan, including the autopilot status. We talked about that in the last podcast as well, that use the autopilot modes. It may be out of nav mode and maybe just holding a heading. Be engaged with the flight. Don't be like just someone sitting as a passenger on a bus. Actively monitor it. By the way, also, prime directive, fly the airplane. Also, as soon as something is out of the ordinary, and I said this before, admit it, acknowledge that, hey, this isn't normal. It requires a lot more reaction than just ignoring it. Make a minor correction now. If you wait, you might have to make a very big one if you're lucky enough to survive it. Oh, by the way, prime directive, fly the aircraft first. I hope you get the point on that. Most aircrafts are very flyable, even though something goes wrong with it. And a lot of the accidents that we're looking at, a lot of those that you saw on that one screen, most of those, the airplane was flyable when it crashed. So just keep that in mind. What if you lose oil pressure? What's the first thing you do? Are you going to try to cross over a lot of good fields to get to a runway and an airport? Well, I probably wouldn't. And I've had a case where I lost oil pressure and I could see that it was all over my windshield. I know that I had no oil. That means you're about to lose your engine. And I just landed immediately. But some good advice that I've also heard from Jeff when we were talking about it, he said, start a glide right now, go to idle power, head towards the landing site right away, but using the power as judiciously as needed to get to the safest landing zone. The engine will last a lot longer without oil at a lower power setting. Just file that one away. That was a good one I learned recently, and I like that as well. If you're headed toward a thunderstorm and you can't get a word in edgewise and ATC has you on a heading in your IFR, you don't have to declare an emergency to exercise your emergency authority. By all means, turn. Do what you have to. Stay out of that thunderstorm. So, what technology do we have? Oh, we got all kinds of technology, way more than there ever used to be. Arguably, we might have too much technology. The important thing is that you know how to use it. Become familiar with all the equipment that you have. And when you buy avionics, they typically come with a really big book. I've heard it referred to like a blue binder that tells someone how to use their FMS. It's referred to as the big blue sleeping pill because it's long and boring and puts you to sleep when you read it. But you need to be familiar. Most pilots just become familiar with the parts of the avionics that they're going to use regularly. But there are a lot of great emergency procedures in the emergency section for these avionics, and knowing what's in there, what they can do, can save your life. One beautiful thing about the avionics, which I just put in my aircraft, is that you have a backup attitude and heading information. You have a backup battery. It'll run for a while, even if you shut your master switch off. Keep that in mind. If you shut your master switch off and you have something that's still running with a battery, that could be your culprit. So if you have a fire or smoke thing continue after you shut it off, look at all the things in the airplane that have batteries that are running. Lithium batteries are a big problem, as you well know. Know how to use the angle of attack indicator as well. That could be a great tool. The Avidyne IFD has some great tools. You could quickly tune 21.5 by holding the flip-flop button for 3 seconds. That's not intuitive. How would I know that? Well, I read the manual. That's how we learn these things. Also know how to get to the nearest airport. The 540, 550 has a nearest button, and the smaller one has a nearest tab. You have to go to the menu, get to the tab, and get the nearest airport, but know how to do it. The Aspen has the red revert button, the REV button up on top there. That flips the MFD and PFD. So if one of those fails right in the middle of an approach or a time when you need it, push that red button. I think most operators of those know that they have them, but that's a great feature that not knowing about could really hurt you. The iPad, oh my gosh, all the EFBs out there right now that can serve as a backup, not only as a position and altitude. Remember, your altitude is GPS altitude, not pressure altitude, but it's going to be close enough to probably save your life. And the position certainly is accurate enough as long as you're getting a good signal to navigate to an airport. If you have an added AHRS, you also have attitude and heading information, which is invaluable. I remember when I flew the MD-80, if we went down to battery power only, we had to get it on the ground or out of IFR conditions in 15 minutes. But I had this iPad and a Stratus, and with these, I could keep going for 4 more hours. Not allowed to use it at the airline, but as an emergency tool, it's fantastic. Also, the other things that those apps have are just fantastic, and you need to be familiar with them, including the checklist that can help you through an emergency. In my airplane, I have this radio, and I didn't realize what that little EC button was. I think I owned the airplane for a year before I ever learned that if I push that button, I get the emergency frequency. It tunes it automatically into the standby for me, and the monitor functions automatically enabled. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Emergency comm button. So know your equipment. Certainly, that's the most important thing. I highly recommend that you do that. I recommend you know the emergency procedures in your airplane. I would request, and you should, read one emergency procedure before every flight. Just go through it. Start with the preamble. Just read the paragraphs up to the first procedure the next time you go flying. I would love for you to do that in your airplane. Then, the next time you fly, read the first emergency procedure. Also remember that there are amplifications. Most books will have like the stuff you need to do, the checklist that saves your life, but not all the information you need right away. But if you get past that point, and now you can go to the amplification is the part you should read on the ground, the part you should study while you're safely on the ground and become familiar with your airplane. There's so much more information in the amplification of the emergency procedures, and that's the part I would really like you to read on the ground. So enough with all this serious stuff. Let's play a game. Let's see how many of these questions you can answer. And again, these come from my favorite author, the old man's book, 1001 Things You Thought You Knew About Aviation. And I tell you, it's a fun book. It's got a lot of fun stuff in it, and that's where I got most of these questions. So thank you, Dad, for that. So question 1. Why is such a joyous sounding word as Mayday used to sound an emergency? So why is a joyous sounding word used to sound an emergency? It kind of sounds like a celebration, not a bad thing to happen. Well, is it to have something to do with the first day of May? Is it the anglicized spelling of the French word? I'm not going to pronounce that. Or maybe a French war began in May? Or was it from the Spanish ayúdame? Help me. I don't know. What is it? A, B, C, or D? I'll give you a couple seconds. Again, if you're watching live, you can participate in the chat to answer these questions, and you'll see the answers. Hopefully, we'll have some prizes one day and give away to the contest winners of who answers most of these correctly. Well, as it turns out, the answer is we say Mayday because it is the anglicized spelling and pronunciation of the French word, what you see there. Mayday, I don't know how to say that. I can't speak French, which means help me. Or the latter part of the phrase, a longer phrase that says for come help me. Anyway, that's in French. Most of the things that we have, we can thank the French for. Empennage, fuselage, Mayday. Question number 2. The Aeronautical Information Manual recommends that a pilot with an urgent condition, less serious than distress, transmit the words pan. What is the origin of the word pan? Is it from the French word penne, like the pasta? Or is that Italian? The Spanish word pan, which is bread, I think, short for pandemony, or the French word penne. One of those is the right answer. I'll give you a second to try to figure that out. Where does pan come from, and why are we saying it? It sounds funny. Like I said earlier, I would feel funny saying that on the radio. In my 21,000 hours plus, I don't think that I've ever said those words, but I've had several emergencies. I don't think I've ever heard it in the U.S. either. If you fly a lot overseas, you probably ought to get very familiar with and practice saying that, because that's what you'll be expected to say. That's the ICAO. Those are the official ICAO words. So where does pan come from? Well, surprise, it's the French word panne, which means breakdown. Aeronautically, therefore, pan signifies a breakdown in safety. So, all right, question number 3. True or false, other than during an emergency, A pilot may not operate an aircraft in a careless or reckless manner. So it's in an emergency, you can do whatever you want. So if you're not having an emergency, can you operate in a careless or reckless manner? True or false? Other than an emergency, you can operate careless or reckless. What is your answer? Careless and reckless is kind of a gray area. It's the one that they try to get you on if you can't get you on anything else, but you did something that didn't seem too cool. But there is definitely a specific regulation on that. Interpreting that is a different story. So true or false? The answer, actually, believe it or not, most of you probably said true, but the answer is false. So although it's extremely discouraged, a pilot may fly in a careless or reckless manner as long as he or she doesn't endanger the life or property of another. And the way the FAR is written, it actually says, no person may operate an aircraft in a careless or reckless manner so as to endanger the life or property of another. So if you're not endangering the life or property of another, rock on, fly careless and reckless all you want. I did not just say that. I don't want you doing it anyway. Consider yourself just as important as others. All right, let's go to question number 4. Again, true or false? A pilot is concerned about the safety of his flight and needs timely but not immediate assistance. This is an emergency and justifies emergency action. Pilot's concerned about the safety of his flight and he needs timely but not immediate assistance. True or false? This is an emergency and justifies emergency action. A lot of people get stuck here and think, well, if it's not, I need timely, but it's not immediate, I can wait, it's not an emergency. What do they think? True or false? Is that an emergency? Well, that's actually true. Such an urgent condition is defined in the aeronautical information as an emergency, just exactly that. So bear that in mind. If you have a situation, and I'm going to go back to that because I think it's important, you're concerned about the safety of your flight and you need timely but not immediate. It doesn't have to be right away, but you need something. If you are concerned about the safety of your flight anytime you're concerned about the safety of your flight, that justifies emergency action. Take action early. Exactly. So one more question. Which of the following does not belong? 121.5, 243, 406, 500. One of these does not belong here. All of them have something in common except one of those. And I did mention it earlier. Well, 121.5 is emergency. Also 243 is the other emergency. So ELTs transmit on those two frequencies. The digital ones I said broadcast over 406. So that's a digital or the newer transponder. So as you might have surmised, I gave you that easy one for confidence building. D, 500 megahertz does not belong. Exactly. So we will, at this point, I'm going to click through. I think we're running low on time. So we are going to pass through to my final thoughts on the matter here. My final thoughts about emergency, again, the first part of handling any emergency is being prepared for one or trying to prevent it to begin with. Actively monitor your flight. Be engaged with your flight. And I've said this before, pilots who get into airplanes like you and I get into our cars are the ones crashing airplanes. You've got to constantly be looking for what's going to get you. Find it before you leave. The preventative maintenance, of course, as well. Remember the 2 speeds. If you find yourself in a hurry or rushing to comply, even if air traffic control says without delay, can you clear for takeoff without delay? If you're not comfortable doing that, just say unable. I don't need to go without delay. Let someone land, then I'll go. Also, stay inside the envelope. Know your limits. Stay within the limits. Be prepared. The point is that the most important point is that you've got to do what's in your best interest, what's in the best interest of your safety, and don't worry about anything else at that point. Next month's topic, we're going to have Captain Mike Jess. He's going to talk to us about a World War II emergency and how it has some very important lessons for today. So starting next month, we'll start having guests, and they'll join me right here and from their comfortable homes as well. In May, we're going to have Jason Miller from the Finer Points. I've had a lot of people ask me for one of my most popular seminars I did in person was airline techniques or professional pilot techniques. for GA pilots. So I've done that with Jason Miller. We've done it at Oshkosh several times, and we've promised to put together an SOP manual for GA pilots. We are working on it. I have a lot of them kind of on my website in the form of the SCHIFF notes. You can go to SCHIFF notes or schiffnotes.com and see some of them. But we will be talking about standard operating practices. In his app, he's put together some fantastic SOPs that you can use as a general aviation pilot. These standard procedures will keep you out of trouble as well, because you do it the same way every time, and you do it in a standard way that helps you catch errors as well. So we'll look forward again, Mike Jesch next month and Jason Miller in May. Again, I can't thank Avemco enough for sponsoring this program. They've been a fantastic company to be the step parent of my airplane. I hope to never need it. I love paying for the insurance, and it's like I'm paying for something not to happen. Again, thank you guys at Avemco. I truly appreciate your sponsoring this. I appreciate the help you've given me for my airplane, and I appreciate you having enough faith in the safety education that I'm giving to offer a discount to anybody who watches this program. So again, if you have Avemco or you're getting Avemco, tell them you watch the SCHIFF Show and you'll qualify for a discount. Also, special thanks to Aeronautical Proficiency Training, LLC, who's doing the production here so I don't have to, Wings Industry Network, and of course the FAA safety team. Again, I'm not going to make Sun and Fun this year, but I will be at Oshkosh. So be sure to look for me there at Oshkosh. I'll be doing a lot of things there. So once again, thank you so much for attending tonight. Appreciate you being here. It's the Safer Pilots who are trying to learn more. And remember, 2 speeds. Good night, everyone.